Welcome back to Notes and Things, a podcast about ideas worth pausing for. I'm your host, Eric Verdine. What does it actually mean to be interesting? Not performing interesting, not curating interesting, but genuinely living an interesting life. Today's guest is Russell Davies. He's a writer, creative director, co-founder of Newspaper Club, and the author of Do Interesting, a book that argues interestingness isn't something you're born with, it's something you practice. He poses 3 simple habits: notice more, collect more, and share more. In this conversation, we get into what keeps people from doing any of that, and why modern life may not actually be as overwhelming as we think. Let's jump in. All right, Russell, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited for the chat. As I'd mentioned previous to us jumping on, you were recommended to one of our other guests, your book, Do Interesting. And I thought it was incredibly relevant for folks today. You know, the 3 things that you talk about in that book is noticing more, collecting more, and sharing more. And often thinking that interesting is not something that you just are, but something that you can develop over time. So in this, this age of AI that we're living in, so often we can just get consumed by the media, consumed by, tech. And we can often feel like our lives are not interesting. What are your thoughts on are people more interesting today than they were 10 to 15 years ago?
Oh, wow. I don't know. It's a really interesting question. I think the world. So one of the things I've realized, and I've been thinking about this stuff for quite a long time. Sorry, I'm going to get round to answering your question, but
That's
might
okay.
have to
Please.
go
Rabbit holes are always
first.
welcome.
One of the things that's happened as I've been thinking about like the idea of interestingness for so long is it's really easy for it to be framed as like, how do you be more interesting? And conventionally that's how it's talked about, and sort of it's like being an interesting person is sort of set as an objective. And that is how I used to talk about it quite a lot. And I think it's sort of what people assume I mean when we talk about it. And it's definitely true in some professional fields and fields of endeavor. It's useful to be an interesting person, right? And like you said, I think there are things you can do which make it more likely that you'll be seen as an interesting person. It's not just, how you're born. Like you can develop it. But I think the real answer is, or the real thing I want to talk about, and the way it actually happens is you can make the world more interesting to you. It's that's like the habits that you pursue in order to be more interesting is to see things, like to assume things are more interesting than you did before, and to find out what's interesting that's out there, and to make the world interesting to you. So to that extent, I don't know. I think maybe the world is more interesting than it was 10 or 15 years ago. For good or bad, I don't know. But I don't know if there's a stable quantity of interestingness.
Right. Absolutely.
Or whether you can have, if I become more interesting, does that mean everyone else becomes less interesting? I don't think so. I don't know if it's a zero-sum game.
There's one of the things that it seems like you're saying as well is kind of reflecting on self, as opposed to worrying about what other people think of you as whether you think you're interesting or not. It's really saying, well, I'm going to be interested in something. And from that energy, when you follow that energy of being interested in something, you end up being interesting to others.
Yeah.
And it's often the times when someone asks, what does one do for a living? And if you kind of just say it in a very kind of banal way, then maybe that makes it less interesting. And I had seen a conversation that you had where you had said even things like insurance that might seem not very interesting, right? But if you're approaching it from, and then I was thinking about this in my mind, because oh gosh, I hate insurance. How is it interesting, right? But if you think of the story behind say insurance as an example, or if you were to visualize that in if you try to explain that to a customer or a marketing campaign, you're diving into events that happen in people's lives that are very, very unfortunate, and insurance can come into
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah. I mean, it's real
this
drama.
idea of, yeah, following the energy and being interested in the one thing, um, is interesting. Something we kind of say that we aim to want to be interested in something, but does it become a byproduct? So if we think of a subject that we want to get more interested in, and then we dig into it and we take time, does that feeling of interestingness come after that, doing that work?
Yeah, I think so I've done the occasional workshop about this kind of thing. And one of the questions I ask people is like, what are you interested in? And people kind of go, they're, for the most part, their first response is, well, nothing really. And unless it's someone who has that, there's the odd person who has like a specific hobby, is like bird watching or, like, but generally, especially sort of younger people, and in sort of creative industries, they haven't. Yeah, they'll go, well, I go to the movies and going out and I read books, but there isn't anything particular. But then if you keep digging, you go, okay, well, what books and what movies and they kind of, you get to go, well, actually, I'm interested in 20th century, like golden age detective fiction, or there is
Hmm.
something, and you kind of go, the point about sharing in the three things is like, well, say that. Don't If someone says, what are you interested in, don't say, oh, books. Say, golden age detective fiction, and you're like, and
Hmm.
then because people will go, oh, what's that, or oh, me too, or like, you've created, by being very specific about yourself, you've created a conversational opportunity and a thing for people to talk about, because people want to talk about people, right? And not generic blandness. Is like, the more specific you are, the kind of the more that is. So yeah, whether you're if pursuing interestingness is kind of a goal, I think inevitably it's a byproduct, right? You
Hmm.
can't decide to be more interesting or not helpfully. It becomes like a horrible kind of just life hacky thing. You kind of, and actually, I would say probably also don't just randomly pursue a topic. Like,
Hmm.
there will be something that you are drawn to. There will be something you have an affinity for. Like,
Hmm.
it, it's like the Dolly Parton quote that's in the book. It's like, find out who you are and do it on purpose. It's like,
Hmm.
find out what you're interested in and pursue it, because people often don't know. They kind of,
Hmm.
it takes a bit of introspection to go, actually, yeah, I do that, or I am
Hmm.
into that, or I have got an unusual number of those, or whatever it is.
It's that saying yes to self-reflection and making it an intentional thing. And that's where you kind of start with noticing more.
Hmm.
So if you say to yourself, I think I'm going to, I want to know what I'm more interested in. And you have some type of mental cue that will allow you throughout the day, whether you're, scrolling on your phone or walking around the park, to engage in something that sticks out to you. And I think in your book, you show, the photos of the tree on a specific
Oh yeah,
trail
yeah,
throughout
yeah,
the year. That's a
yeah.
lovely idea, because everyone can kind of think about that. They take their dog for a walk and they see how the hedge changes over time, and particularly those who have the seasons. And then to the next point is collecting, because if you notice but you don't collect it, then you're going to forget it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There's also a thing of, um, I don't know if I explicitly put this in the book actually, but there's a thing of like, some of what I'm trying to encourage people to do is try a bunch of stuff, because
Hmm.
some of it won't interest you. Like, you kind of have to try a bunch of stuff and then watch your own behavior and kind of go, oh, well, actually, I did this thing and it turns out I've stopped doing it. So I'm probably not interested in that, you know?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so it might be photographing a tree. And then I try that for X amount of time, and then I stop. You kind of go, okay, well, that's probably not what I'm interested in. But there'll be,
Hmm.
if you try a bunch of stuff, there'll be some things that stick. And then you go, okay, that's useful. And it might be new things. It might be things you never thought before, which is also good. And yeah, the same with collecting, whether it's actual physical things or whether it's just noting things down. It's about attention. It's like,
Hmm.
like you pay attention to something and you see more of it.
Hmm. Absolutely. There's a book I'm reading right now, and forgive me, I'll put the author in the show notes. It's called Tiny Experiments,
Oh
and
yes,
it's
yeah,
this idea. Yes, yeah, you might be familiar with it. It's
yeah,
come out somewhat recently. Just doing little things here or there to test the waters and see. And I think it seems as though people might get wrapped up into thinking that they're wasting time. Oh, if I try this thing or I try that thing, I'm wasting time or wasting money. But it's about having just different little experiences and then seeing about following that energy.
yeah.
Um, there's a quote out there that goes around as well. It's like follow the energy and not the money, because
Right.
money will come
Mm.
from the energy. And the
Yeah,
more
yeah,
that you care about something, and the more that you dig into it, get excited about it, others will see that energy, and eventually, the money piece of it will come.
and the smallness, I think, is a quite a powerful thing as well. This is not like a, you know, you have to get up at 5 a.m. every day and,
Hmm.
exercise for 45 minutes, meditate for 3 hours. And, it's like spend a minute a
Hmm.
day doing something. Um, there'll be some benefit to that. And and also, I mean, again, at a human level, like that's just a good thing to do, right? You'd like spend a minute doing that. Again, when it crosses over into the professional level, um, as an astonishing number of people don't do that. So the fact that
Hmm.
you've done it, that actually
Hmm.
does help, gives you an advantage,
100%.
Um,
And I really want to put a pin on that as well, because it literally a minute, right? If you spend that moment looking at that tree, or spend the 5 minutes just reading through a book that you wouldn't have normally read, it is an insignificant amount of time in the grand scheme of the whole day. But the action of doing it, reading for 5 minutes, gets you tremendously far if you do
yeah,
it for the course of a month or 2 months. And that I chat with folks about that who say, "Oh, no, I don't read when I have time for it." I go, "You have 10 minutes? Just take 10 minutes, and then you can apply that to basically almost anything." And
yeah.
um, and I
And I
like,
get it though. It
mm,
is one of the things so I wrote the book with a bunch of my friends, and we were really conscious to kind of not be trying to lecture to people who've
mhm,
got, like 3 kids and 2 jobs, and, it's kind of, and going, yeah, you should spend all your time photographing the same tree. Like
mhm,
it really is like, we've tried really hard to kind of go, just like a minute a week might
mhm,
help. It's that, uh, and yeah, yeah. I hope, because so much, and actually also the reason it's full of suggestions is most of these won't work for you, or you won't
mhm,
do them, or like
mhm.
if one thing in this book helps, then that's great. You know,
And one thing over time is exponential results.
yeah,
Exponential results.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
I liked how you said too, you don't have to get and meditate and then have your perfect cup of coffee and then have the journal time and then get to it, because we see all of these influencers and business moguls online who seem like they have this life that allows them to do all of these things. Say, That's what I need in order to
yeah.
have these interesting ideas or to have an interesting life." But it isn't that. It isn't that.
No,
And so often too, that's just what people are showing.
yeah. Well, and it's a sort of tautologous, um, like you have to be successful in order to have that kind of life. It's like that kind of life doesn't create success. It's like you need 3 admins and, a private jet in order to be able to do that kind of stuff. So it's not the other way around.
Absolutely. Why do you think people who want to be interesting struggle living that way? What do you think are the big roadblocks for folks when you were thinking with your friends about, okay, we have to do the 1 minute, because that's very accessible. What do you think are the big things that keep people from that 1 minute?
I think um, I think there's the language around this stuff and the kind of is unfortunate. Like like saying I want to eh, be more interesting or do more interesting things is quite loaded. It's quite I think people are slightly embarrassed to talk about that. And similarly, um, people saying, "Oh, I want to try more creative things and do those." It's quite the expectation is quite high, and uh, people when you say that kind of thing, there's a sense that, well, if I do that, then other people are going to judge me. How successful will it look like I'm trying to do things that I don't know how to do. Will I fail? How will it look if I do that? It's quite you know, uh, it's a whereas saying, I'm going to try and get fit, or I'm going to try and lift weights, or I'm going to try and run or something. Um, I think that's much more seen by the world as like, oh, well, that's a good thing. You should do that. Whereas
Mhm.
trying to say, I'm going to, do like spend my day noticing lots of red things.
Mhm.
People are going to be like, what? That seems why? That seems stupid, And then
Yes.
if you then say, oh, it's because I want to explore, noticing and paying attention to the world and creativity, that it feels really, I don't know, hard to talk about, I guess.
Mhm. How do you encourage people who go through, say, a creativity workshop that you provide in
Oh,
being okay
I've
with
lost you.
facing those types of thoughts, um, and not wanting to move forward with it? What are the kind of the strategies that you suggest to people? Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Russell? Hello, can you hear me now? Can you? Oh,
Hello again.
Oh, hello. And we're back.
Not sure what happened there. Sorry about that.
No, quite all right. Excellent. So we can just, obviously in post we can just remove that. It'll
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like it never happened.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, so the modern life is very, very busy, and folks find it hard to kind of do their own creative things or do the interesting things that they want to do in life. Do you think that modern life is optimized against doing interesting things?
Uh, hmm. I don't know. I tend to. I mean, I'm quite contrary. I tend to question a lot of. I'm never quite convinced when people say, "Oh, we're busier than we've ever been. Life
Hmm.
is faster than it's ever been." You
Hmm.
know, attention spans are decreasing. Blah blah blah. I'm never quite sure all that is true.
Huh.
Um, and uh, so I don't know that we're busier.
Hmm.
I do know that um, you know people aren't, certainly in my part of the world. People aren't having to fetch water from a well.
Hmm.
Um, you know what I mean? Like
Yes. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for every um, inconvenience of technology, there's also the fact that we're living much longer lives, so that
Hmm.
sum total of interesting things you can do in your life may have gone up,
I
rather
really,
than
really
down.
like that as a idea because we're talking because it depends on what people mean by busyness. So it's, net actions taken. Maybe, I mean, well, it doesn't, still that wouldn't work but I think that the idea of having to get water, is a really great example because back in the day, people had to consume their whole day into gaining resources,
Yeah,
chopping wood, preparing for winter, planting crops, um, tilling and caring for them. Whereas today we have all of these modern conveniences. And that's where we then just put something else in.
yeah, yeah. And
So
it's a bit
the,
like,
yeah.
how um, people are now discovering that whatever we do, the body consumes the same number of calories
Mm,
broadly. However much you exercise or don't exercise, the body will consume roughly 3,000 calories a day.
hmm.
And um, like maybe there's some similar, and it turns out if you don't I think the thinking is, I mean, I'm very like, this is not medical advice. If I think the thinking is, if you don't exercise and don't use those 3,000 calories in sort of healthful ways, then the body will turn those calories into anxiety and inflammation. You know,
Mm,
and
hmm.
maybe there's an analogy with your attention and your um, where you focus, and where, like, there's a bunch of attention calories, and if you or you could, like, you're going to consume them anyway. All you can do is direct them towards, you know, positive things or not positive things. I don't know. This analogy might fall apart, but
That's okay.
but the
That's okay. Keep going. Keep going.
but the it feels like again, I always um struggle when people kind of talk about how, like, modern life is more complicated, more complex than it used to be.
Hmm.
And I kind of go,
Hmm.
I suspect that's not true. I suspect that if you were chopping wood and blah, 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 that felt pretty complicated. And you just knew more about it. You were like to us, chopping wood looks simple because we never do it, but I bet actually if you had to do it, you're like, oh God, this is really, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes. No, I really, really appreciate that perspective. And the way I say that because I mean I read a lot about future of work, what it was, previous lives, et cetera, et cetera. And the one of the things that always sticks with me, people say, oh, how horrible the world is It's so violent, it's so chaotic, but there's been so much work and research done, particularly Daniel Pink talks about how the society is so much safer than it
Yeah.
ever has been by far, by far. And the reason why we think it's not is because we're inundated with media that focus on the negative things purposefully, because those are the quote more interesting things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like this high ideas. Are we really busier, quote unquote, or is it just a different form of life? Because as you mentioned, if you were a hunter gatherer, as an example, you had to be preoccupied with something at this all at the same time, and it comes down to energy, right? We don't want to expend energy, or we have to expend a certain amount of energy, as you kind of mentioned. And for them, they're doing that by trying to survive. For us, we do it by either doing, just having to do things. And this part about what if the calories are put into anxiety and inflammation, I think is super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, that's a thing I read somewhere, so who knows how true that is. But,
Well, yeah.
and equally, probably in a similar place, I think people who've studied the interesting thing about the hunter-gatherer kind of existence is loads of free time.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite
yes.
an efficient way to live, and
Yes.
just loads of free time, which presumably then is given over to culture and interestingness and pursuing conversation and relationships. And I don't know. It's kind of, so maybe it's all wrong. But yeah, I struggle with those. Like I say, those, like, life is clearly different than it was 50
Mm-hmm.
years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Whether it's busier, I think is a very, or busier or more complex or whatever, is a very fixed, or is very determined by what you mean by busy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean,
Well, there's a certain,
I'm old
yeah.
enough to remember writing, like, if I wanted to send a message to everyone in the company I worked in, I
Mm-hmm.
would have to handwrite it, give it to a secretary. They would type it up. I would then correct it. Then they would type it up. Then it would be distributed, photocopied and distributed by hand to everyone in the company.
Mm-hmm.
There were advantages to that. Like, you were more careful about the number of messages you sent, so friction created a gate. There were, you thought more carefully about it, blah, blah, blah. But there were disadvantages. We should recognize the fact that it was, that email has some advantages over that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the whole, most organizations would rather use email than paper memos.
Right. Right. It makes you wonder too, how much time, net time was expended by the organization in that method versus, say, if you were to say put value to emails that are sent.
Yeah.
Today, how much value is actually added by having hundreds of emails a day when it could be in a memo.
I could genuinely believe, this is one of my secret, like, background schemes that because obviously organizations existed pre-computers, and
Mm-hmm.
large organizations and complex
Mm-hmm.
and distributed, and they did things. And I imagine they got pretty good at using paper for a lot of those purposes. I am slightly, I've been doing lots of kind of digging about that kind of stuff. I could believe that for some kinds of organizations, going back to paper might actually help. But I also recognize that's probably quite a quixotic and stupid pursuit. But I could see, like, it has advantages, right? And we're part of what we've been going through is we keep inventing this technology, which we don't yet understand. We haven't lived with it for long enough we haven't lived with email for long enough to understand how to use it well. Like, we lived with paper for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I
you
would
know.
dream if we brought back carrier pigeons. That'd be pretty awesome.
But just
Just have a
imagine if
little,
you're
just
head of carrier pigeons for a large organization and
that'd be
someone's going, "Where
amazing.
is my pigeon?" It's like, I don't know.
I'm rereading Harry Potter right now,
Right?
and I just love the owls. The owl post. He's like, "When's Hedwig coming back?" Not sure. He
Yeah.
might be. Who knows how far
Yeah.
away he
Well, and
is?
how reliable is that? Like, how many packets do they drop? Well, like what
Exactly.
are the KPIs for the owl deliveries?
Oh, that's so funny. What I think it's important is that you're kind of saying too is this openness to look back on how things were previously done and say, you know what, that might be interestingly interestingly a more optimum way to go about it. And I think a good comparison to that is writing a handwritten letter, or taking handwritten notes from a lecture
Mm.
versus typing. And uh, there's very clear data saying that your brain is much more engaged when you're handwriting in an analog way than when you're typing on a computer. And you're able to memorize things or understand concepts a lot more when you actually put pen to paper than reading through lecture slides or typing things out. And it's interesting when you think of organizations who are obsessed with efficiency. But I think, not wanting to go back to paper, right? But I do think that the people are starting to come around to this idea that there are certain things that we've thought are super convenient in the business world, like email, that is just eating up time. And for instance, meetings. I hate meetings so much. Everybody can say, the book Death by Meeting, right? Or the idea Death by Meeting. But that's why organizations are saying, okay, we're going to put a cap on the meeting. You have to know why all the key stakeholders are there. We're going to send a pre-memo. We're going to have the countdown on the screen of when the meeting is going to end, to make sure that it's productive and it's not just people talking about, the football game.
Yeah, but again, I think that's too unnuanced a view of what who people are and what organizations are, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a meeting is theoretically unproductive in that, like, no decision was made or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but a bunch of people just met and chatted and they are a better team than they were before that meeting, or
Mm. It's
and
true.
it's clearly a lot of meetings are a waste of time on some level, but they may not be on another level. And I think again, one of the things, actually, we didn't write this in the book. There was a bit of like, we had some thoughts about kind of interestingness at work, for instance, because I think a lot of the time you're invited to a meeting and you can choose to be interested in that. Or you can go, you know what, this would be a useful time to catch up on my email.
Mm-hmm.
And both are reasonably valid. Like, I think for a meeting, like just opting out altogether, pretending to be there and getting on with something else is a reasonable response. Engaging, a lot and paying attention, and, like one of the things we talked about but didn't write was like really actively try and like focus on whoever's speaking and try and work out what they want, and like just really pay attention in a way that people don't normally do in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else suggested, actually, what about if you just really paid attention to one of the people who's not speaking, like the whole time, just kind of go, what are
Yes.
they thinking? Like, you can make meetings fun for yourself by like really paying attention to stuff. What is the unfortunate, I think, bad response is like half being there.
Mm-hmm.
That makes for a
The
boring meeting, is
lukewarm.
if you're half there. But I think either just opting out altogether is entirely reasonable and just pretending to be there. Um,
So
you know,
I actually I love how you I love the pushback in a good way, because it's almost like eating my words in a sense, because I gave a lecture
Right.
2 weeks ago that was about how important the kind of free time, just productive free time is so incredibly necessary in a creative process or in a project
Hmm.
process. And how the whole argument I was making was that that might be one of the things that makes us different from AI, in that AI is A, B, C, D, E. But the example I give is I'm sitting here at my desk and I look out the window and I notice a tree. And I just start thinking of something entirely different than what I'm working on, and the light bulb goes off.
Yeah.
And that's basically what you're saying from the human standpoint, the relational standpoint, with meetings that might seem, you know, disen- meetings might seem, quote, wasteful, but in fact, that team is getting better. And I think in particular for that, shows why in-person meetings are going to be way better than Zoom meetings. And typically, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
But
but
again,
that's a
I
great
think it's,
point. They're relational. Hmm.
yeah. But I think we're going to, again, we don't know how to do this yet, right? I think we're going to have, like, over time, we'll start to work out the cost benefit of an in-person meeting versus a Zoom meeting versus,
Hmm.
like, there are huge advantages to a Zoom meeting. You can get people from across the world to have a conversation at a moment's notice, like that is an advantage. But you have to kind of recognize what that won't do is this, this, and this. What it will do is this and this, and an
Hmm.
in-person meeting has these advantages. And I think good organizations will get good at knowing, like, we need to have this many in-person meetings on these kinds of projects, and on these kinds of projects we don't, and it'll work differently. And so in my um in my work, we do a lot remotely, partly because a lot of the team is all over the country, but we do way more informal things than we would have done before. So just
Mm.
in person visits to galleries,
Hmm.
visits to shows, hanging out, like, just so that people have physically, and you chat about your kids, and, you do the human level stuff, because you don't do that so much in this kind of context. Um,
Do you let those events come up organically, or do you schedule them out
oh no,
regularly to make sure they happen?
if you let them come up organically, they wouldn't. Like, yeah, no,
Important.
you have to
Yes.
be,
Yes.
because it doesn't feel like work, right? Like, people are would you have to kind of really push against organizational norms to make those things happen, because they don't seem like that's what work's supposed to do. And like I say, we, as a society, we haven't practiced yet being good at allowing that stuff to happen, because it used to happen organically, right? It used to, when everyone was in the office, then people would go out for lunch together, or people would go to the pub together, or, like, you didn't have to organize that. When
Hmm.
they're not in the office, you have to organize that.
Hmm. Hmm. One of the themes that you keep bringing up, and I really appreciate it because it is so very true, that a lot of the things that we're encountering in modern society today is very, very new. They're very new. And we don't know how they're affecting us individually. We don't know how they're affecting us societally. And w- yeah, when we hear something, this is the optimum way to do it, and we have to really question, but is it?
Yeah,
And how do you know?
yeah,
And we haven't done it that long. And for someone to say, like myself in some parts of this conversation, so confidently, this is the way, right? But we always have to take a step back and say, well, maybe it isn't, because we're so new at it. And over the past, 20 and 30 years, there have been these hockey stick leaps in technology that we've all kind of brought into our own lives. We have, the personal computer, obviously, and then the cell phone, and then the smartwatch, and the things like this. And we often start using them in our life, before we really realize what they're doing to us. What How do you approach this? Or do you think about oh, I have this new technology. How do I do it sensibly? Or do you kind of jump in and then kind of reflect back on it? How do you approach it?
I like new things. So, I like to try new things. So that's just who I am. So that kind of, and again, if asked what I was interested in, one of the things I would say is like, I'm interested in new technologies. So, you know, um, and I've been, whether it's cause or effect, I've ended up in jobs where that's a good thing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I always think there's a, oh, what was it called? There was a bit of NYU, which was like a design interaction course, and they used to have, their motto used to be the school of the recently possible,
Oh,
which is
love
a
that.
really nice phrase. And I used to think that what I'm interested in is the recently easy. So there are technologies like blogging. For me was the like writing on the internet for a long time, or even like publishing to the world for thousands of years, was incredibly difficult. And then
Mhm,
blogging came along, and it was easy.
mhm,
And I like, if you notice that that something has suddenly become easy and start doing it, that's quite good, because it takes society quite a long time to notice that
mm,
something's suddenly become easy. So
mhm.
quite a lot of what I've done and my career and all that kind of stuff has been the recently easy. So I like that, but I also think there's a perspective of, again, it may be just because I'm old enough, but you know, um, we have lived through a bunch of technological change. But think what it must be like if you were born in the early 1900s. Like,
Mhm,
you know, uh, flight arrived,
mhm,
nuclear power arrived. Electrification, like vast electrification, like
mhm,
there's been a lot of change for a lot of people for a long time. You know,
mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
maybe for a long period of the Middle Ages, not much changed, but
Right.
certainly since the Industrial
Yes,
Revolution, there's been a
yes.
lot of change for every generation.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think that makes it any easier. Like, I don't think we should go, oh, just relax. At least you're not, experiencing space flight. But um, again, I always think about like fax machines. That was an extraordinary technology that changed communications a lot. And none of us is going, yeah, the world was blown up by fax machines. And, like, how can we ever get, or can we get, I mean, maybe we should go back to fax machines. Like, technologies come and go. And, you know, again, I think it's a similar effect to what you were talking about with news. Is society gets obsessed with a new thing and is convinced that it is the end of the world,
Mm,
or the savior of the world.
mhm,
And they normally aren't,
mhm.
you know.
Yeah, they normally aren't. The so one of the things that I know that you do is the newspaper company, correct?
Oh, newspaper club, it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, newspaper
Yeah.
club.
Yeah.
So it allows people to make their own newspapers,
Yes.
correct? Which is
Yeah.
just which is a lovely thing. I love the physical piece of that. So when we're talking about all these different technologies, but now there's this need or desire for people to want to create things into the physical space with a newspaper. How I guess what's why? You know,
Yeah, a reasonable
why
question.
yeah, why? Um, but I think it was a lovely idea. I think it's a lovely idea.
Well, it was an idea that I had with a couple of friends quite a long time ago now. 15 years, maybe 10 years. Can't remember. And I'm no longer involved. We set up a company to do it, and we
Mm,
um, we sold it off. And I'm
mhm,
I'm I'm a bit sad that I'm no longer involved, I have to say. Because the people who run it are lovely, and it's a small company up in Scotland now. Printing millions of newspapers a year. But it's a good example, I think, of what we're talking about, which is that newspapers as a physical thing have been developed over hundreds of years. They've been tested and tried, and like the format and the sizes and the way it works and how the printing works, it's taken hundreds of years to be really good at some particular things, like as a way of delivering information, as a way of doing all this stuff. They were just attached to a business model which no longer worked. So as a business, printed newspapers is terrible. Like, that does not work, and the conjoining of news and advertising, like, no longer worked, right? And as a way of getting important information to people quickly, they have been replaced by other things. But as a physical thing, they're really good. So the creation of the business was kind of going, okay, well, we can use the internet for what it's good at, which was like a website where you could create a newspaper, and we could use newsprint for what it's good at, which is archive, store of information, a pleasurable reading experience, all that kind of stuff. And you get the best of both worlds. And I think Newspaper Club is that thing. It's the best of both worlds. It's got internet scale reach and all that kind of stuff. And it's got paper physicality and experience and that kind of thing. But it's a small business. It's like, even if it was phenomenally successful, it would still be a small business. It's it's an interesting idea, but it's like, it's not. When we started, journalists were kind of going, wanted to write the story that somehow we thought we were going to like go back to print, and people are going to stop reading news on the web and they're going to read it on. It's like, no, it's just it's like vinyl, right? It's like, it might be growing a bit, but it's not going to replace Spotify.
Right.
Or streaming or whatever,
Absolutely. Well, I think I love, the kind of what you said. It is niche, but at the same time, there's that reading experience, and you're trying to, take the best of both worlds. I think there's a magazine I subscribe to called Monocle. Fantastic publication. I highly recommend folks checking it out. But it combines all of these different topics. So politics, design, culture, art, and you don't know where you're going to get when you get it. And you might go through all these different topics. And I think that's the beauty of a newspaper as well, is that you can, because of the physicality of it, you can allow yourself to rest in these ideas that you might not have encountered otherwise. And then the benefit of it not being electronic is that you don't have a notification.
Yeah.
And I think the more, again, people realize that their attention is being taken, kind of co-opted, taken by other people, the more they're going to want to say, I want to have these experiences where it's just me as the individual interacting with this thing, whether it be it a newspaper, a book, or a magazine, without being interrupted, give our full attention.
But again, I think, like, it's new. It's all new, right? Like, we are, I suspect, in some amount of time, 50 or 100 years or whatever, we'll have a balance of things in our lives where we'll go, well, I read these magazines in print. I do this thing over here. I have these physical books and I have these digital books, and we'll have worked out what works well at what thing. I always think of Monocle as a great example of kind of what I think of as, well, because my experience of Monocle is I see the cover and I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy that, and then I never read any of it. Like, I leaf through it and I never read any of the actual articles. And but the cover gets me every time, and that feels like typical digital bait and switch, right? It's like draw you in with an attractive thing, and then the actual experience is unfulfilling. And it's really expensive. Like that's the other
Yes.
thing that you kind of that you're getting media products that fit a very small niche, and you go, okay, well that magazine works. For the most part, print magazines are not effective businesses. You know, they're
Hmm.
what they've become actually. Print magazines, and I think it's brilliant, is they've become hobbies.
Mm.
You know, you like there's a huge efflorescence of gorgeous, interesting magazines that people are publishing once or twice a year. And if you can find a really good magazine store, you'll see this incredible range of things. But very, very few of them are effective businesses. They are
Hmm.
creative outlets. They're hobbies. They might break even, but they're a thing. Part of what makes them so attractive is they're an expression of a passion or an interest that someone has,
Hmm.
and they're publishing the magazine because they want to, not to make money.
Hmm.
Um, and that's great. Like the infrastructure exists to make that happen, but the days of like magazines that make huge amounts of money has gone away.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so true. I was in a bookstore in Boulder, Colorado, and they had an awesome magazine section. Just exactly what you were saying. Super niche, incredibly designed. And I thought to myself, like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome." They had, I mean, I am into distance running and they had these ultra magazines, and and that I had never heard of before. And I go in there
Right.
and I say, "Wow, this is amazing!" And hearing the story, this narrative, seeing these photos, and yeah, it's basically a convergence of technology where it allows people to self-publish, even if it's a hobby, without having to break the bank.
Yeah.
Almost like a physical manifestation or artifact of their own blog or portfolio.
Yeah.
And that is really neat.
And
Excellent.
I talked to someone who does one of these magazines. They do two a year, and they said it costs them money. Basically, every issue costs them money and quite a lot of time. And they say it's about the same amount of time and money as if I was into fishing.
Mhm,
You know, so instead of fishing being my hobby, this magazine is my hobby. Um,
mhm,
and you know, it has the added benefit of people can read the magazine, whereas they can't they can't read your fishing. Um,
mhm,
but that, like a lot of media, I suspect a lot. I mean, like a lot of YouTube channels are that, right? They're kind of
mhm.
podcasts are that,
Yes,
you
right.
know. I mean, and it's not a bad thing. It's not demeaning to say that
Mhm,
that's what they are, because that's what makes them joyous a lot of the time. That's why a lot
absolutely.
of the big podcasts, I think, now have stopped being as interesting because they're like formulaic media products now.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, fitting a rubric, speaking for a particular audience, and, then it just becomes just like the other podcasts in that category.
Yeah.
Um, well, Russell, this was fantastic. I know we're coming to the top of the hour of us. This was a really, really fun conversation. If you were to leave folks with a way in which they can explore their interesting self this weekend, what would you recommend that they do or practice or go to help do that?
Oh wow. Um, I would say I would say something like pick something to pay attention to.
Mm,
Um, so there's a story. Actually, there's a story in the book about. Um, yeah, there was an interview with Rachel Syme did in the New Yorker with a singer called Lucy Dacus, and Lucy Dacus talked about how when she was a kid she played a game called Fall in Love with a Tree, and she
mm,
would say when she was driving along, like bored in the back of the family car, she would pick a tree in the distance and focus on it, um, and just pay attention to that tree. And she did that once, and like a shaft of light kind of, shone on the tree, and she was like, "I made it light up." Um, and that doesn't happen all the time, but that thing of just like you're sitting somewhere bored, or you're on a public transport or in the car, or like pick a thing and focus on it and really notice it and pay attention to it and go. The example I think we talked about when we were writing a book is like you're in a doctor's waiting room.
Mm-hmm.
There's ceiling tiles. Look at the ceiling, like count the ceiling tiles. Notice that one of them is slightly different to the others. Like, how is that? Like, get to where you can, if asked, like after you'd gone, you could describe the ceiling tiles in great detail. You'll suddenly notice that 5 minutes have passed or something, and all you've been doing is looking at ceiling tiles, but you'll have paid attention.
Absolutely.
That's one. I'd do that on Saturday, and then on Sunday I would pick something and look for it. So I would go, okay, I'm just going to find 30 red things, because it will make you look up as you walk around and do your day. You kind of, I'm looking for red things. Makes you look at the world, and that's all it really is.
Yeah, making us look at the world, paying attention, being reflective. Awesome. Thank you so much, Russell, for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Brilliant questions.
Super. Thank you. It was super, super fun. I think we could dig so much deeper into thinking about the prehistory and hunter-gatherer and how technology is really affecting us today, and
especially as none of us, neither of us actually really know. We're just making stuff up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for all those out there. The show notes, you will find nothing, no data connected. Wonderful. We'll have a lovely rest of the day. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
See ya. Bye.